time to speak with us. I just wanted to give you a little brief description of what the class is about. So we are studying media technology and the evolution of media technology, and we sort of started off with printing press, and we've been coming forward the telegraph, telephone, and we're just rounding off on computers now. So we're looking at how those technologies have evolved and how they've affected us and how they affect society. So that's sort of a little, in a nutshell, what the course is about. And now for the benefit of Kwasi and also the professor, I'll just give a little bit of a description of what Miles does. So Miles is an independent American broadcast news journalist who specializes in science, technology, and aerospace. He attended Georgetown University, and in 1982 he was offered and accepted his first broadcast position with WRC-TV in Washington. He was later a reporter and an anchor in Boston, Tampa, Albany, and St. Joseph, Missouri. He has founded Miles O'Brien Productions in Washington, and through his stories for numerous outlets, including PBS, Discovery Science, National Science Foundation, SpaceflightNow.com, and many other corporate clients. So I'll just start the questions off, and hopefully Ludwig, who's my co-interviewer, when he comes online, he can ask more questions, and then we'll open the floor up for anybody who wants to ask you some questions.
So you're doing the easy questions, and Ludwig is doing the hard balls. Is that how it goes?
I'm doing the questions, and then Ludwig will also ask you some questions.
It's just a joke.
Okay. So Miles, just to begin, could you briefly tell us how you came to be interested in journalism?
I've always been interested in photography and writing, and I did it for fun. In high school, I started a kind of an alternative newspaper for the high school newspaper. Getting a little bit of feedback here. I'm going to try to grab the headset here. Hang on a second. You can hear the feedback that I'm hearing?
I can hear you pretty good, yeah.
Yes, I got feedback also. That's why I muted myself.
Yeah, let me just switch to my headset here. So
am I muted?
I don't know. Yeah, no, we just heard you, so I guess not.
No, Kwasi, you can mute yourself by just, you know, using the microphone icon on the top.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Can you hear me? Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Okay. So I was always interested in journalism and photography and the visual aspects of it, as well as the writing. Started a high school newspaper, went to Georgetown, became the editor of the newspaper there. But it all seemed, I grew up in Detroit, Michigan. I knew nobody who had any background whatsoever in the world of, so I didn't really understand how you could make a living doing it. And I took an internship at NBC WRC. And I was bitten by the bug, and I never really kind of looked back. And they offered me a job, which was great. And because it was 1981, and it was kind of a bad recession, and a lot of my friends were having a hard time getting a job. And here was this kind of fun thing, and they offered me a job midnight to 8, listening to the police scanners, and I was thrilled. So I just never really looked back.
Interesting. Media technologies change so rapidly. What have been some of the challenges that you've faced in keeping up to speed with things?
Well, it's been a constant evolution since I've been in the business, and when I went to CNN, I started covering science and technology, and really I had an early look at a lot of these things, a lot of these developments, and if I had been really smart, I would have made a lot of money investing. Instead, I just reported on it and watched it all happen. And here I am working for a living still. But it's, basically the big trend is in, like everything else, it's kind of a Moore's Law kind of trend. Things, when I started, they had these giant 3/4-inch video cameras with a cable attached to a 100-pound recording device. And you had to go back to a...
We've actually seen those in our course.
Yeah, they're classic. And you had to go back and edit on these giant machines, hundreds of pounds each. And all of this now can be reduced really into this. and you can edit on this now, or maybe you have a laptop. But literally hundreds of thousands of dollars of equipment is now boiled down into these little devices, and so that is a huge game changer. It reduces the kind of pyramid nature of the business. It changes the way we curate and gatekeep news. Everybody can be a contributor. Everybody can be in the game. And that is really good on a lot of levels and can be really scary on a lot of levels. And we just witnessed it a few days ago with the election of a fascist to the White House. And so, when you have people on social networking kind of reinforcing their concerted beliefs, and they live in this little bubble, that's not good either. So it is empowering, but it's also it makes it easier for tyrannical rule to occur, I think.
Yeah, I agree. So two-part question next. What kind of changes and effects have you seen over the course of your career on how news and science news, because that's what I'm always interested in, is communicated? And the second part is, and I guess you sort of already spoke about this in the last question, have the changes been for the better or for the worse for society and for us in general?
Yeah, again, when you look at science coverage specifically, again, I see a two-edged sword. I was hired at CNN in 1992, and I worked for a dedicated science and technology unit. We had 8 people covering science and technology at CNN, which was an impressive commitment. And it was, frankly, the reason they did it was there was advertising money linked to it. AT&T approached CNN and told them we would sponsor science coverage if you put it on the air. And Ted Turner was having a hard time meeting the paychecks at the time and said, yeah, I'll do science. And that lasted for quite some time and was a wonderful experience. Over time, CNN got more successful generally and less focused or concerned about science, and there was less of a need to have that revenue that was generated by science. And so they eliminated the entire science and technology unit, which was I thought was a terrible thing. I mean, I think that to the extent that the cable news networks can have a reasonably broad audience and can introduce them at least to some basic concepts, it's a good thing. So I left very worried that none of this stuff would ever get out. But it's now, instead of going to the big department store, there's a boutique out there. There's lots of little boutiques. There are people who know a lot about space. There are people who know a lot about climate change, or about glaciers and diminishing glaciers, all of whom are out there. And because everything's so small, they're able to contribute their own little piece to the bigger puzzle. What it does, though, is it forces, it puts a lot more responsibility on all of us as citizens to be our own curators, editors, and producers of our own newscasts. And if we fall in the trap of only listening to the things that we agree with, or our friends are talking about, we can narrow down our field of view quite a bit. And that kind of answers both questions in a way.
Yeah. With the availability of so many different editing tools, it's becoming easier to manipulate messages. Do you think that this is true today compared to earlier reporting, or has there always been this ability to change or alter a story? And I ask this because in class, when we started to learn about photography, we were learning about photo hoaxes. And so what's your take on that?
Well, I mean, we could go back to the UFO days, in the 50s, right? The flying trash cans, which turned out to be, or, a little more recently, pre-internet, pre-social networking for sure, the famous Time magazine O.J. Simpson cover, where they darkened his complexion. Right. So there are plenty of it, and we could cite a few more of these over time. There's always been this temptation to airbrush, enhance, outright fraud. And it's just a little bit easier because once again, it's all in this little box. And so you can do all that stuff within a few Instagram filters and a little bit of photoshopping. And so, yeah, it's, again, I really, all of this, I'm going to sound like a broken record, but it really is user, consumer, buyer, whatever you want to call it, citizen beware. You just need to not just blindly accept and retweet or share, because there's a lot of stuff out there that is outright wrong, outright false, comes from a particular point of view that is has an agenda. And in some cases, frankly, a lot of it can be these bots. There's a lot of material out there that is generated robotically now, kind of to make it look as if there's a huge groundswell of support for a particular idea that it really isn't there. So I think the onus has really come on us. There used to be this, the high priests of news, the editor of the CBS Evening News, Walter Cronkite, as managing editor. They had a tremendous amount of power over how the nation thought and how the nation perceived the world. That is long, long gone. The idea of having 3 network newscasts having that kind of dominance over public perceptions and opinion is long gone. So we all can be our own curators of news, but it's important that we are curators and not just blindly taking in garbage.
Exactly. What would you consider yourself to be some of the tipping points in media technology as it applies to journalism in terms of changing the way journalism went?
Well, we could do film to videotape. Obviously, that's huge. Videotape, and this is a little more arcane, but analog videotape into digital editing and capability. That was a huge shift in our business when you could, instead of having to go from tape to tape and in an analog fashion edit, to be able to edit in a nonlinear way on a computer was a huge, huge advancement. Then, of course, the World Wide Web, to having the capability of marrying, all the information that ARPANET and the internet provided with pictures was, an extraordinary event. And then you can look at, evolution once that genie came out of the bottle is really the rise of the blogs. When you look at a pivot point, one of the big points in time was when Clinton was first accused of having his little affair with Monica Lewinsky. That story, back in 90, I want to say 8, maybe, I don't know, somebody around there at that time frame, was the Newsweek had the story, and they decided to sit on the story. And the reason they were sitting on the story was they wanted to check a few more facts, and the Pope at that time, John Paul, was in Cuba, and they had a whole issue prepared on the Pope in Cuba. And so they didn't want to mess up their issue. So they decided to sit on the story and put the Pope thing up. And this little known blogger by the name of Drudge got wind of the story, and he published it on his blog that Newsweek had the story and was sitting on it. And so it was a huge pivot point in the way news was released. All of a sudden, really the barbarians were at the gates. They stormed the gates at that point, and they started pulling down the media edifice brick by brick, and that's where we are today. It's just completely, it's a whole different world. It's this huge cacophony.
Yeah, it's interesting the amount of change.
Mm-hmm.
Quite incredible. Last question, which I always like to ask: where do you see the future of media technology heading? And I ask this because I was fascinated with IBM's Watson computer that can now answer, search all these databases to answer medical questions. I think they even had them on Jeopardy, am I right, or something like that?
Oh yeah, well, I've actually played Watson in Jeopardy, and he creamed me. It creamed me. And yeah, it was pretty frightening. You can see it on YouTube if you want. It's kind of humiliating. But so as machines develop true language capability, which we're on the cusp of. They don't fully understand language yet, but you can pack them up with so much data that they can write a story, right? You know, Watson can write a basic, you know, sports story or a very fundamental, you know, using the inverted pyramid, who, what, when, where, why type story. And what that does is it further commoditizes kind of the basic facts of what is happening. And so what that does is the onus on me then is, well, what do I provide? What's my value added over Watson? You know, what can I do? And a lot of that is, you know, something that it would be very difficult for Watson to learn, though probably not impossible, which is to analyze, interpret, and compare, you know, make comparisons to historical, technological, other technologies, other fields, and try to pull that all together to make some sense of it in the grand scheme of what the public is interested in. So I think machines are going to take over, you know, all the news. There's no human being that is editing that. That is all a machine that provides the lead story based on their, you know, black magic algorithm. So it is really, I think, a matter of time. You know, well, that's inevitable. There's going to be more and more of that. But there's still going to be room for people to go out and ask those questions in a pointed way that right now machines can't do. Maybe they will someday. And in which case, then what do I do for a living? I don't know. Maybe I can come hang out with you and Greenland. I'll be a boat boy.
That's all the questions that I have, so I don't see that Ludwig made it on, so maybe I will open the floor to the professor and Kwasi if you have any questions for Miles.
I let Kwasi go first. I have a few questions.
Okay, go ahead.
You're muted, Kwasi.
Oh yeah.
Oh, sorry about that.
How are you, Kwasi? Where are you in the world?
Great.
Are you in New York?
No, I'm in New Jersey, right
All
next
right.
door.
All right.
I'm in New York.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I have a question in regards to the topics you cover. Being that you're a science journalism, I want to know, how far do you cross into the supernatural? Do you talk about like ghosts or aliens at all, or, you know, things that I think science is kind of afraid to touch on, but it's kind of like a mystery? Do you touch on that at all?
Well, I've done a couple of things when I was in my CNN days. I did an hour documentary on the search for life outside our planet, but it was not I wasn't coming at it from the Roswell camp, but more the NASA microbiology camp. So, and this is the more scientific pursuit of, you know, okay, here we are, somehow life happened here. We're trying to figure that out. And what's really interesting about life here is everywhere we look, where we find liquid water, we find life. It doesn't matter where we go. And so that's a really fascinating thing to think about. So when you look out and you see a planet, like, you know, an icy moon of Jupiter, for example, and you think to yourself, well, wait a minute, if there's liquid water under there, and there's wherever we have liquid water here, there are living things. So maybe there are, in fact, living things out there. So that was how I approached it, which was much more from a scientific perspective. But then we took it all the way to SETI, which is the search for extraterrestrial intelligence, which are people who are listening for radio signals from an alien planet. So, you know, we're at this point now, we know there are, like, I don't know, I believe the last thing I saw there are trillions of potential solar systems out there. I believe it is, or stars, anyhow. Or maybe it's solar systems. I don't know. It's so many. It's hard to comprehend. It's hard to believe that we're alone. However, there's a problem with time, space, and all that stuff. So that was kind of the hour. And then I did one on actually on people who have seen UFOs because I saw a UFO. I was in Maine several years ago, and I saw I'm a pilot. I actually understand a lot about flying objects, and I saw something that was not like anything I've ever seen before in the way it stopped, moved. And it could have been some secret, you know, government thing that I will never know about or whatever, but it always made me think, well, you know, maybe I shouldn't discount people who see these things. And so I did a series on that for CNN, and about 2 weeks later I got fired. But They're unrelated. However, if you go on the web and you put in my name, one of the first things that'll come up is Miles O'Brien was fired for this series on UFOs. But you can see the series there. I tried to do it with some degree of respect, and not, be laughing at people, because frankly, I had seen something unusual, and I didn't know what to do with that piece of information. And I don't think it's wrong to hear from people who've had these experiences. Some of them get a little wacky, but who's to say, right?
Yeah.
So do you believe like the government has information, top secret information that they'll declassify one day, or are they going to try to like keep this a secret forever if they do have any information?
Well, it's interesting. John Podesta, who was very high in the Hillary Clinton campaign and high in the Bill Clinton White House, is a huge ufologist, I guess. And when he was chief of staff for Bill Clinton, he was pushing the government to declassify. The Air Force has a whole dossier. They call it the Blue Book, I think it is, of all these sightings, many, years and years worth of UFO sightings, which have not been declassified, which is really makes people think that there's more there than there probably is. And yes, of course they should declassify. It's crazy that it's not. If they truly, as they say, there's nothing to it, well, show us. And if they're hiding something, God, we probably should find out about that, and maybe Donald Trump is an alien. I don't know. Maybe and they don't want to admit that. I don't know. Could be that orange hair. It doesn't look like it belongs on this planet. I'm not sure.
I've heard that there's a possibility that under the sea there's life, and there's an entire civilization of humanoids. Have you heard of anything like that called reptilians?
I have heard about it. I haven't seen any data to support that. It's amazing. You can go very deep in the ocean to these these things they call smokers, which are essentially, it's kind of like an underwater, almost like a mini volcano, but it's like hot water coming out at the deepest part of the ocean where you never see light of day. No light. It's pitch dark, and there's all kinds of life down there because there's enough energy based on the heat coming out essentially from the center of the earth to allow life to exist. And that goes back to my thoughts about the icy moons, for example. It seems logical that if you have that energy source and water, you're going to have some kind of life. Whether there are, reptilians who are trying to reach us, I'm a little skeptical of that. But again, show me the data.
What about spirits? Sorry, Denise, man. Spirits. You never touched on that.
Quasi, can I interrupt for a second?
Yeah, go ahead.
Our sort of main topic here was sort of history of media. If you have a question in that direction, can we sort of revert to some of those topics?
Okay.
But while you're thinking about it, let me sort of attach a hot topic. We all were, accelerated by the democratization of media and media tools. But as you said, it's also a Pandora's box. We all want freedom on the internet, but that allows trolls, that allows misinformation, that allows bullying, hate. Should there be internet regulation for the good or worse of it? What do you think?
I don't, I am a big First Amendment guy by the nature of what I do. And even if we could come up with a way of avoiding the slippery slope of regulation on free speech, the internet is not just one jurisdiction. It's a global enterprise. And even if we put tight regulations on it here in the U.S. where it was born, and born to be free, I might add, by its very architecture, there's nothing we could do to stop something that would violate those regulations from popping up. So I don't think it's, I know, places like China clamp down on the internet, but I'd rather be, despite all that has happened in this past week in this country, I would rather be us than China. as far as where we are. We are still, we still have the freedom to speak, and I hope that's not, he talks a lot about the Second Amendment. I don't think he cares as much about the First Amendment, but that's when it get a real fight, I think, when it starts
We
going
could just
after that.
renumber them. Maybe that'll make it more attractive.
That's a great idea. He won't be able to find them. We'll make it like the 143rd Amendment. We'll be free speech.
No, I meant just swap one and two.
Take him too long to get to it. That's a really good idea.
Okay. It's funny that you mentioned that you started out by saying, "Oh, it all lives in the cell phone." That's actually how we started out in the classes. Like, look at your cell phone and look at the technologies that are in there, and let's trace it back and look at the roomfuls where that's coming from. But it's not just the size of the machines or the tools we have, but also the time pressure. So do you feel as a journalist you still have time to research and verify, or is that a lot of pressure to get things out there and just hope for the best that whatever you're picking up on news is verifiable and is true? Do you get the time from your employer to do that, or you have the time, or do you just have to rush and cross your fingers?
I am a very lucky journalist working for PBS. And I will ask you to remember us during Pledge Week, because we rely on the kindness of strangers. But I have been spending actually the past really pretty much almost a solid week fact-checking a 1-hour documentary I'm working on. And that's the way we roll here. People in day-to-day journalism, I'm doing a piece for the NewsHour right now. We spend a lot of time going through and making sure we got everything right. I did work at CNN where for 17 years, where there was tremendous pressure to crank out material, and there was less time to do that. Having said that, though, we had a team kind of in place. I mean, we didn't have time, but we had a lot of people, and we'd throw it at a story, and we would do our best to keep things on the straight and narrow. I cannot really vouch for the process anymore, frankly, because I do see such tremendous pressure driven by social networking that is forcing the old mainstream media people to respond and put stuff out there that they might not have put out there before. It's kind of like Newsweek holding the Monica Lewinsky story, right? Those days are so long gone. The idea that you can sit on a story like that and maybe double check it one more time before you release it. There's so much pressure. There's so many ways stories get out. The world leaks like a sieve. So that pressure is very difficult to resist, and that's why probably, the first release of information, maybe that should be Watson, and then all of us should have a little bit of time to sort of integrate it into a larger context, which is kind of what I do now. I don't have to run around necessarily and chase fires, or in my case, a volcano or whatever the case may be, but I can wait and go in later. I mean, for example, we did when the Ebola epidemic was really a problem in West Africa. There was a lot, all the networks went in, and it was horrific, and they're standing beside dead bodies in the street, and it's just horrible. But the coverage was almost, it was just so tragically superficial. And so we waited, and we actually went a couple of months later. And there was no media there, none. And it's still going on. It's just not, the peak of the moment, the tail. And we got such a more interesting story, providing context of what happened, what the scientific factors were. If nothing else, we had time because people could talk to us. There weren't 27 camera crews. So I guess what I'm saying is there are people like me who can do this. It's rare to be funded in this way and to be able to do this, but it does exist, and it's worth wherever you find it, whether it's PBS or Publica or wherever you find that kind of journalism that appeals to you, to support it one way or another, either just by listening or clicking or tossing them a few bucks, because I think we've seen how important a vibrant fourth estate is just watching this election. I mean, I think journalism has a lot to explain for itself. on how this election has been covered, how Donald Trump was made into this reality star for cable news, and all those things are very important for us to be attuned to.
Okay.
Anybody have-
Sorry.
Go ahead, Quasi. Do you have any more questions for Miles?
Yeah, this last question. I just want to know if science in as journalism can one day maybe cover the paranormal in terms of ghost sightings, because from what I've been reading and studying, it seems like science likes to shun that away and put it into religious nut thing. So I want to know if you think science will one day cover that seriously as a mystery that needs to be unearthed.
All right, so it is a mystery, it is supernatural, there is a belief system, but what's the science? What is the science? Where's the data? And if you honestly, if you have some thoughts on that, I'm all ears. It sounds like I've never seen a cover story in the journal Science about ghosts, supernatural ghosts. So what I do for a living is try to stay in that world. That's not to say what you're talking about isn't of interest and worth exploring. It's just not science right now, unless there's something I'm missing. Now, if maybe there's somebody out there that's made a breakthrough and is able to routinely talk to the dead in a seance, in which case I would like to do a story on that. That would be good.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not trying to minimize your interest, by the way. It's just
no. I just wanted to know your take.
No, I guess it's kind of just it's a little bit the category. It's kind of like when schools insist on teaching creationism in science classes. When we know there's a lot of science on evolution, and there's no science that human beings walked the earth with dinosaurs. That just didn't happen. We know that. So when people say that's science, that's not science. That's a belief system. And so the same goes for the supernatural. Right now, that's in the category of, that's in your theology or religion class. There's nothing that moves it over into the science realm, which is what I cover. Now, if I was in fact a religion reporter and covering theology and that kind of thing, we'd have a different discussion right now. It's just my beat.
I do know there is a paranormal science, though. So I do know there is a part of science that does investigate. So I want to know if you cover that paranormal science at all.
Well, what are the journals and who are the people and where are people getting their degrees and what are the leading schools in paranormals? Are the questions I would ask. Where are those people?
I would say that, if we're looking back in history, often we declare something we do not understand as paranormal or as religion or as, attributed to some sort of supernatural force. If you would have told people 200 years ago that we'll be flying to the moon, that we communicate with artificial images from one continent to another, it would have been borderline heretic. So there may actually be a lot that we today do not understand, that we sort of brush off as non-scientific, but as we get closer to exploring those kind of mysteries, they will change into being science once we do understand them and find reasonable motives and explanations in physics or whatsoever to explain them. So I think there's room for mystery, but we don't know these things yet.
Well, my problem as a reporter is I'm supposed to cover people like Denise and her husband who go and do these far-flung adventures trying to figure out what's happening in the real world. That's my job. It is not my charter to go out and try to find ghosts, because I don't even know where to begin to do that story. Now, as you point out well, I mean, it could very well be that this moves into the world of science. There may be some sort of connection or breakthrough or finding that would change this, but I don't have the. I don't think it's quite there yet. Put it that way.
Yeah, that would be up to researchers to figure out, and then you can talk about it.
But anyway, where are these great paranormal researchers? And I'll start paying more attention to them. Where are they?
It's all over. I don't know exactly where they got their degrees, but I do know it is mixed in with a bit of theology and a bit of
Quasi
Bible.
They didn't go to Trump University, did they?
I missed that.
Did they go to Trump University?
I don't know.
Then they would be bankrupt now.
There's certainly some paranormal things that go on there.
Well, Bob, I want to thank you for taking the time. I know that you're a busy man, and this was a really interesting discussion. Thank you for sharing your knowledge with us. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure. My pleasure. I hope it
And
helps.
you're welcome to come to Greenland with us anytime.
I would like that very much. That was one of my favorite all-time trips, by the way.
Thank you very much. And I hope when there are any reports on us exiting COP21 and thinking global warming is a belief system, that you'll be there writing about it.
We just spent our story meetings have all been about how we're redoubling our effort to cover global warming. So fear not. The only thing I can do to stem this tide is tell my little stories, and I will.
Well, you'll find me in the streets and in the classroom.
All right. Good to meet you.
Thank
See you later,
you.
Denise.
I will post the interview online and send it out. So thank you.
Okay, great. I'm sure I'll probably be hearing from the Breitbart guys over all my comments.
No, we don't make it public.
Oh, I don't care. I don't care a bit. It's all right. You take care. Have a great day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. See you.
Thank you, Professor. Bye, Quasi.
Oh, you guys are done?
Yes, we're done.
Oh, the thing just, I don't know what happened. It just, all right, take care then.